Plymouth Township Planning Commission will come to order at the 7 p.m. Secretary, please call roll. Here.
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 Is there a motion for the approval of this evening's agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve as submitted.
Moved by Commissioner Pratt, supported by Commissioner Barberina to approve the agenda as submitted. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. And the approval of the minutes of our last meeting of May 15th.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve as submitted.
Moved by Commissioner Pratt, supported by Commissioner Barberina to approve the minutes of our last meeting as submitted. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak for any item that is not on the agenda? Okay. And then moving on to old business, the Ridge 5 Corporate Park. And Ms. Howell, you have your report.
Thank you, Commissioners. The application before you this evening is for the Ridge 5 Corporate Park for final site plan approval. You'll recall that the Planning Commission considered tentative site plan approval earlier this year with a number of conditions to be finalized. Hillside Realty is proposing to construct 9 different units for research and design, office, and industrial uses on Parcel A, which on the screen, the red dashed line illustrates the Johnson Creek, which divides this property. The property was split in 2018, I believe. It just hasn't been updated in Wayne County's parcel data. So the site itself is 133 acres, and approximately 50 acres of that will be preserved as wetlands and open space, while the single cul-de-sac will provide access for 8 of the units, and then a 9th unit will be located here at the southwest intersection of Ridge and 5 Mile. The applicant has provided a response to the outstanding items in the site plan packet. Oh.
Is that the applicant?
Is that the applicant?
No, I'm sorry.
He's going to plant a lot of...
Turn them down.
He's going to...
He's got those sad eyes.
And he wants to plant a lot of trees. He's here to protest the removal of the trees.
Sorry. There, this is the response letter that was emailed out earlier this afternoon to the commission, and a hard copy is also provided in front of you. This letter that's provided by the applicant details the outstanding conditions and how they will be met. The first condition was that the public lands designation along Johnson Creek be clearly identified on the site plan, and they have since revised their survey to include that linear designation along the creek. The second outstanding item was that the cost estimate be submitted, and a final one will be submitted when the final stamp plans are provided to the township. The applicant will be preparing and submitting a shared access agreement with maintenance provisions for open space, as this will be developed as a site condo. The internal pathway, including the easements and the maintenance agreements, will be finalized and part of the master deed. The applicant is proposing, instead of traditional public sidewalks along Ridge and 5 Mile, is proposing an internal path network that would be for public access, and that would course through the natural topography of the site with public vehicular access onto Ridge Road that may eventually connect into across 5 Mile into Northville Township and the trailhead that exists on that side once those lots along 5 Mile are developed in the future. And then we had some comments in the review letter about landscaping, especially along Ridge and 5 Mile, so that it would be consistent with the type of landscaping and streetscape that Innotech provided. So there's consistency along this MITC corridor. And the applicant has acknowledged to do their landscaping in keeping with the Innotech Business Park and to enhance the landscaping at the boulevard entrance. And where possible with the topography along 5 Mile and the creek. And then we've had a last note about the detention basin landscaping can't double count towards the replacement trees that are required as part of this. And that has been noted. The applicant does intend to provide all the required replacement trees on the site. And they provided a detailed tree survey. 36 trees in total will be removed as part of this project. So they have been, the lots have been designed to be context sensitive and respect those natural features and the existing wetlands and floodplain on the site. The applicant is here this evening as well to give a presentation, and we have some slides for that as well that they have prepared. But our recommendation is if the commission is satisfied with these conditions and as the applicant has acknowledged that they will meet these for the final stamp plans, then we will recommend final approval this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And the engineering report?
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioners, we have reviewed the plan set dated May 20th and received in our office May 29th for compliance with Plymouth Township engineering standards. Final engineering approval is a condition of final site plan approval, and we haven't completed our engineering review as of yet, but based off of what we have reviewed, we don't recommend final engineering approval at this time. However, we recommend final site plan approval contingent upon finalizing all our engineering comments, getting engineering plan approval, securing all permits and easement agreements as well. So I don't see any issues with the engineering. It's just going through the final details and working everything out right now. There's nothing that's going to stop this project from moving forward.
Okay. Thank you. And the applicants received a communication from the fire department. They found no deficiencies in the plan from a public safety perspective. And the applicant is here. Take the podium. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You got to use the
What? This
gooseneck doesn't work, right?
Oh, this one.
You got to use the other one. Is that one working?
It sounded like that one was working just now.
Oh, okay, maybe they fixed it.
Can you hear me?
Ken, which one should he use? Ken, which one? Oh, it's working now? All right,
Yeah, it's on.
never
on.
mind.
Testing, testing.
Okay, thank you. I'm Dave Harden with Hillside Investments. As Laura had mentioned, Hillside is developing the roughly 50 acres at the southwest corner of 5 Mile and Ridge Road. You may recall back in December, we came in front of the commission for tentative site plan approval on this project. Back then, we referred to it as Ridge Road Industrial Park, simply because we hadn't yet spent the time to name it. And also, that's what we thought it was going to be. We thought it would be a light industrial manufacturing type development. Over time, we've kind of shifted our focus away from the light industrial manufacturing uses to a more of a research and development type user with a significant office component as part of that their program. The type of tenants we're looking for this development are not really the ones with the 15 to 20 truck wells, bulk warehouse and storage, and 100 trucks coming in and out of the site every day. We're really geared more towards the tech-driven engineering and development type tenants, the ones looking to find and attract that young new talent pool, and also retain that young new talent pool through real estate and the built environment. As a result, we identified a real estate marketing firm that we wanted to work with on this project, and we've since branded the project as Ridge 5 Corporate Park. Ridge 5, right now we're planning to support approximately about 700,000 square feet of building area on the site. The exterior boundaries of Ridge 5 are pretty well set by the natural surrounding features, but the interior parcel boundaries can be moved or shifted to accommodate essentially any size and type tenant we need. So if a 6-acre parcel, as you're seeing on the site plan, needs to become 2 3-acre parcels to attract specific tenants, we can do that, or that 6-acre parcel can take a portion of its neighboring lot to become a 9-acre parcel, so we have the ultimate flexibility to accommodate any size and type tenant we need. Go to the next one. We really feel that the natural surrounding environment of this site is one of the best attributes of development. 2 of the lots are right adjacent to the road, but the remainder of the development is kind of tucked away, hidden back behind wetlands, woodlands, and bounded by the Johnson Creek. And because of this, we are going to be constructing a walkway, a pathway through these areas and around the development. The intent for this pathway is for an easement to be granted to the township with a shared maintenance agreement put in place as part of our master deed condo documents that will allow this pathway to be for the public and the private tenants of Ridge 5. We are still working on the details of this path, where it's going to be, what it's going to be made of, but we are confident that with Plymouth Township and the state of Michigan's cooperation that we'll be able to provide a great asset to the community. I think, I just want to scroll through some of the other pictures that we have. These are our marketing renderings that we've been working on, just to kind of, none of these buildings are obviously, we're not here for any of these buildings, but it's just to convey the idea of what the park could be and what it could look like. We find that a lot of tenants that we're trying to attract have a hard time envisioning just a big open field, so we're just trying to show what it could become. None of these things that you're seeing here are the ultimate thing. We're developing that as we're going on.
Any questions or comments?
I've got a comment, I think. When I was out there today on 5 Mile, and I'm glad to hear that you're moving more towards research and engineering, because while I was there for about 40 minutes, I must have saw 40 trucks, 50 trucks, tandem trucks coming both ways. I feared for my life. I mean, I had a small piece of shoulder west of that bridge on the north side that I could park at, and then I walked across because I wanted to see from the bridge where someone could potentially park, and it's like there's really no place.
No, there really isn't.
That terrain is really, really rolling, and I mean it's like a ravine on both sides of the bridge. So so if there's going to be public access, where would the public park?
The public, we are constructing a small parking lot, you can see off of Ridge Road here, halfway in between the edge of our property and the cul-de-sac. So it'll be, again, we're still finalizing the details, but I think there's roughly...
That's that little cul-de-sac that I see right there?
It's
where you're pointing?
It's just a little parking lot
Yep.
that comes off, and that's the start of the pathway on this side.
So that pathway would wrap all the way around and follow the Johnson Creek?
Yes, it's going to wrap down here through the edge of the wetlands, around this big borrow pit that caps the floodplain, and then back up as close to Johnson Creek as we can get it. There's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot of growth.
Yes. Well, the bigger challenge is the
Yeah.
MDQ.
Yeah, so when I see your picture and it shows the path and people with benches, and I mean, I find it would be nice if you could do it, but I don't, that's not for the faint of heart.
Well, that pathway shot actually was from about, you're standing right about here.
Okay.
How many parking spots?
I think there's about 10 or 15 planned for now, but
Well, that's not bad. I mean, that's a good start.
And the path does not go all the way around, right?
the path goes all the way around, all the way out here up to 5 Mile.
Yeah.
There is that, I think it's called the Cold Water Springs path that is in Northville
Yep.
on this side. It's just a short path. I think it's just this lot that's here at the corner.
So then you
Yeah.
would have a contiguous sidewalk from that exit onto 5 Mile around to the parking on
We have no
Ridge?
sidewalks on the right of way out here.
There would be sidewalks.
There would not be sidewalks.
Oh, there would not be
There would
sidewalks.
no.
So if I entered from Ridge and I walked all the way around to 5 Mile, I'd have to walk all the way back that way.
That's correct.
Correct? Okay. Right.
We are proposing at least, I don't know, Leslie, so we're proposing at least a couple path connections. I think the last version that I worked on, we had one here, and maybe one here and one there. Again, it's kind of, we're allowing that flexibility for that to happen, we're going to do it, but as I mentioned, with the lot lines shifting, it's kind of, the locations that they connect to is kind of depend on the first one or two lots get developed, so that we know we have a concrete lot line here to put that path on that.
And Commissioners, as each of these 9 lots are developed, each tenant will be required to come before the commission for tentative and final site plan review. So you'll see how each of these units fits into the larger puzzle and where those connection options are available.
Do you have any prospective tenants at this point?
Yes, we do.
Do you?
I think we have probably,
Half?
yeah, probably about half.
Is it your intention to sell the 8 lots first? Because I notice your renderings don't have any buildings on lot number 9.
Yes, we are not really sure about that. I think that it could be an industrial type use, or it could be more of some sort of convenience type use for that whole area. I know there's going to be a lot of industrial office and R&D type users going in that space. So it could
I
be-
wondered if that's not what you were going, some kind of commercial, perhaps use that could service those buildings there. I wondered if that's not, because obviously that lot is the triangular shape is somewhat problematical for you know,
Well, and you have the railroad.
and the railroad cuts it through it too, so.
I think that was our overall intent for that site to kind of sit on its own and maybe one day become some sort of food
heard that
retail
was
type
what-
commercial component.
Yeah, yeah, so 6 years from now, we'll be able to approve something.
I have a question. Your third photo in this package, it shows a sidewalk there. Is that sidewalk something you're committed to?
No, this rendering would be on where one of the this would be on lot 8, I believe, right next to the pond. So if that sidewalk were to become, if it were to be placed there as part of that tenant's specific site plan approval process, maybe, but not as part of our development.
Because you show it on the other side of the street too. I guess the assumption would be that that development would also have built that into their plan.
Right, yeah. Again, we're trying to convey what this park could be, and limiting some of those details, I think, takes away from what it could be in trying to be more realistic. So it's kind of a balance there. It's marketing collateral, not necessarily exactly what's, right.
Any other questions or concerns?
Actually, Laura, there are a couple of the responses that says, oh, we'll do something. So that's putting themselves in your hands to decide the architect area. What will be done? Are you okay with doing all of that? Are there any areas that you're concerned about?
Sorry, sorry, the applicant and I have discussed these items, and they're aware of what is required. In this case, because there's a formal response that's on record to the commission that these are the conditions, I am comfortable with these, more so than just a verbal acknowledgement. These are the 7 items that must be completed before I can sign off on the plans checklist, if you will.
Laura, I know you sit on that 5 Mile Road committee that's looking at the development of all of that.
Correct.
And it seems like, I recall that on the Northville side, on Ridge Road, there's also a small parking lot that goes, there's some trails that go through Northville.
Yes.
That's what he was talking about.
Yes, and so is there any possibility in the future, I'm presuming there's going to have to be a light someday at Ridge and 5 Mile, that this pathway couldn't weave its way and connect up with the other one in Northville? Is that a possibility, do you think?
I think it is a long-term possibility as these lots that, or as the parcels north of 5 Mile get developed in the future. There are some obstacles with some of those parcels just because of their natural features and some of the topography and contamination, that those might take longer to develop. But perhaps in 15, 20 years, as the rest of the corridor develops, there's that potential.
So this group is aware of that, and they can kind of identify opportunities for long-term connections?
Yeah.
So the county owns the property, or the city of Detroit, is it, on the other side of the creek?
The city of Detroit, correct?
Okay, and what is their current status with that property?
They are actively marketing it.
So that's the extent of it right now? So have they made any, so we have, our side of the creek has been dedicated, and what goes on with their side of the creek? Do we know?
I believe
Is there a easement? I mean, there is an easement, right, that we created?
there is an easement. I was not here at the time when this was adopted. It was 2016.
Conservation easement.
But Dave Richmond, maybe you can recall, I believe the easement is just on our property. Or on,
Well, and it's not even an easement. I don't believe it was an easement. It was just rezoned as public lands just on the east side of Johnson Creek,
Just for, as a strip park,
just for a linear park.
linear park.
And it was
Nothing on this
rezoned, not on the other side, no, because the township didn't have any abilities at that time to do it because it didn't have any say in that land.
So has the city made any indication of what their intent is on that side of the creek? I'm just curious. I mean, it would be nice if we complement each other on both sides of the creek. I mean, if we did something like, right?
no, you're exactly right. We haven't even had a pre-development meeting with any potential applicant on that side. It's very preliminary, I think, and Dave, jump in here, but the utilities for that parcel are probably the most challenging of all the sites on this corridor.
There's a lot of work going on with the utilities. There's been a lot of conversations with Watua for extending sanitary sewer that way. There's going to be, in order for that property to be developed, there's going to have to probably be another water tank actually put down in that area. There's going to be extensive.
The Detroit property?
Yes,
Right.
yeah. And there's going to be water main having to be extended. So there's quite a bit of work yet to be done for that. So there's going to have to be quite a use coming in for that property.
So what happens to 5 Mile itself, west of Ridge Road? Does it stay as a 2-lane?
I don't know what the long-term plans are. I have not been involved with the 5 Mile corridor planning right now, so.
Terrible. It's absolutely terrible. I mean, the road itself, I mean, some of those semis are right in the middle of the road because the ruts are so bad over there.
I know.
Well, Gary Roberts was here, if you recall, who's involved in
Right.
this, and he said that there were plans to do some,
Widening.
Well, I believe eventually 5 Mile is supposed to become a Class A road.
that's it. Mhm.
But, and I think they're still trying to work on funding mechanisms or different possibilities on how that can happen. But I believe there's discussions on 5 Mile becoming a Class A road.
That's great. And I think also along Ridge as well. I think he said that, but I can't hear him.
There's been discussion about that, yes.
The, if my memory serves me correct, that the landways, the landways company there does contribute so many thousands of dollars to maintain 5. But it's interesting, once you go on Napier, that borders the landfill, that road is really beautiful.
Napier is, yeah, but 5 Mile,
No, I know.
not for the
I'm
faint of
sure,
heart.
yes. It's not
Well,
for the
yeah,
faint of heart.
and the trucks just destroyed Ridge.
Oh, my
I mean,
God.
they just tore it apart.
Ridge and 5
Yeah.
Mile,
They're not allowed to use it anymore, but damage has been done.
So last time you were before the board, there was discussion on the perimeter pathway. And we had discussion as to who maintains it, who pays for it. Knowing they're looking for final site plan approval, how does that figure into the township costs, responsibilities for maintaining the pathway?
The township administration has stressed that they would like, since this will be accessible to the public, but then also an amenity for the tech park, the corporate park, that this would be a shared maintenance, and that agreement, percentage-wise, would be finalized in the master deed with the township attorney.
And does shared refer to a equal split, or do we get into that sort of language now? Or when do we get into it?
I think that would be a discussion with the administration and the attorney. But if there's a recommendation by the planning commission, based on how well you think this will be used by the public versus tenants, future tenants of the park, and if this is an amenity to the larger community or to those in this area, then that recommendation could certainly be made to the administration.
Do you have further thoughts on that?
I can't say I really, I guess we're leaving it open-ended as part of the process to move along to the board. Is that what we're to understand?
I'm sorry, could you repeat
Trying
that?
to figure out, I don't necessarily know how we've made progress from our last discussion till now, that we are ready to vote on the shared agreement.
Well, if the commission has a recommendation, that could be made to the administration and the township attorney to,
I think
Fine.
what's important is the concept of having some type of shared agreement for maintaining the pathways. How that's accomplished, I'm not sure if that's part of our role. I think that's something between the developer and the township administration. I don't think as a body we enter into that type of negotiation.
I think he brings up a good point, though. I mean, we have right now in the township, if we add this parcel as a public entity, and we have Miller Park over on Ann Arbor Trail, that gets used very infrequently and is costly to maintain. We have the parcel that's directly north of and west of Pavilion, the Four Season Pavilion. That's 8 acres. That's, I think, was it Bosch that helped fund the trails in there?
yeah.
Those trails are getting pretty bad. I mean, and how many people even know that exists? How many people will know this exists? How many people know Miller Park exists? So when we look at long-term maintenance costs, I think they could be pretty excessive for very little use. I mean, this is, I can see where your concern is with that.
Right.
So I mean, I don't know the answer to that,
I don't know.
dilemma.
Well, Laura, is that kind of a decision? Would that come before the Board of Trustees?
It depends how the township attorney would want to execute that agreement. It certainly could, and that could be a recommendation that the planning commission makes as part of their approval.
Didn't we talk about that on the Board of Trustees, or was that on this board when we talked about that maintenance?
Oh,
Remember?
I believe it was with the Planning Commission.
It was.
I mean, I think at some point, the Board of Trustees, when the rezoning was before the commission and then the board a few years ago, talked about the potential for a linear park and what that would look like.
No, I mean recently. It must have been here, yeah. It's loud.
Well, provision could be added in the motion, correct? I mean, just a suggestion that it's something that needs to be addressed and resolved, right?
My personal feeling is I don't think the public's going to use it that much. If
I
it
don't
were-
think they are either.
If it
The
were gonna-
employees will use it more. than
Yes,
anything.
the employees, and it's a nice amenity for those folks. I could see long-term, if it links up with the whole Northville system and all of that, then yes, but that, as Laura just said, that's really a long-term kind of goal.
Well, that's where I wouldn't look at it as being prudent for us to have a shared maintenance agreement when, for all intent and purposes, the majority of people that would be using it aren't residents of Plymouth Township. They're going to be employees of the park. So I don't know how we address that. I mean, can we just say we don't want a shared maintenance agreement and we want them to shoulder the cost of maintenance?
I don't know, personally, my opinion is that's not our decision. The attorney, because now we're talking the master deed and all that the attorney can, I mean, we can make a recommendation that there is some modest township contribution to the shared agreement, and leave it at that. I certainly wouldn't get into what percentage or anything else is, because that's just not our role here as I see it. That would be up to the administration to make sure that whatever was proposed be reasonable, and doesn't create an unusual liability for the township. Yeah. Well, I think it potentially could, but my point is that's something that's not our deal, I don't think. That's just my opinion, but I don't think so.
Is this pathway that would be along the Johnson Creek, is that still on your property, or is it, part of this linear park that was established, or where is, I don't understand the relationship at that stretch of creek.
The stretch of the pathway along the creek?
Yes.
So let me, I'll say that the reason we have this plan in front of the commission today is because we recognize there was an intentional rezoning of that area as public land. So in our mind, the township had thought through the fact that this was to be a public park system. As we were laying this out, there's not enough room to squeeze in a parking lot in between the creek and the train tracks. We moved it down off of Ridge Road, and ultimately that allowed the pathway to become much longer, about twice as long as it was before. So our intent with this pathway was to provide, as it was zoned, this public linear parkway. We just ended up making it bigger and kind of moving it as we got further into the details. But the pathway along Johnson Creek will be under an easement for both public and private use. But it will be.
But it's on your land.
Correct.
Right.
And part of the reason I believe that the creek, or this walking path is pulled east a bit from the creek is because of respecting the natural area. And that MDEQ has already been involved, correct? And it would have to be a boardwalk system if it were to extend further into the creek and really, traverse that area. So in order to minimize maintenance, long-term maintenance and costs, it has been pulled in slightly.
So what happens if the township well, we don't really want to contribute to that, does it then become the sole responsibility of the park, of the condominium park?
That would depend on how the agreement was written.
Pardon?
That would depend on how the agreement was written and agreed to. I'm not
Because
sure.
I think all of us would tend to believe that any participation by the township would be minimal in there, based on the lineup there. But for them to say, well, if you're only putting 2% in, we don't want to make it this long and things. I mean, the requirement that there be the walking path is really independent of who pays for the maintenance of it. Because if that's the way we see it now, and that walking path should be there, that internal network should be there, regardless of who has to pay for it. And if the township doesn't want to, or has a very minimalistic approach to it, that doesn't relieve the condo park from the responsibility to put it in anyway.
Well, basically, the walking part is not a closed loop. It's just it's a dead end if you take the whole path, right?
Yep.
So what would happen if, I don't know how the developer feels about this, but what if we said you don't have to put in that 10 or 15 spot parking, and then township wouldn't pay anything?
And then the township wouldn't have access to the light, right?
Well, they should, because it's the way it's zoned, I think.
I mean, I
Well,
don't,
it's zoned, but if you can't park, how are you gonna access it? I mean, if he says, pull the parking, well then,
They would have to park in one of those businesses and use your cut-through, I would guess.
Yeah, which,
I don't know.
Private
how
property,
pathetic that is,
yeah.
because they have X number of parking spots for X number of employees. And
right, and
have you developed that one leg of the walk just to accommodate the parking lot?
No, it's actually a very nice area to walk through as well. I walked it twice with our civil engineers and landscape architects to, we had drawn this thing on a sheet of paper as a straight line, not really knowing what that looks like walking through any of those spaces. So we took the time to actually spend going out in the field and walk to see what the nicest areas are. We don't really have any interest in putting a pathway in that stares at the back of of big buildings, or kind of a boring walk through the woods. So we intentionally picked kind of the best areas to walk through.
So what area did you actually walk?
I walked the whole site.
The whole site?
Yes.
And you can walk the whole site?
Well, there's a lot of standing water kind of in this bottom right corner. That's all wetlands down there. That's the reason that's not being developed.
Did you have like waders on, or did you?
I did not. I didn't go in the water, but we walked right up to the edge of it.
Yeah. So you can do that, though?
Yes.
And get back in.
And Hillside did offer to that walk to the township for the administration to join. That was made available.
Again, I think it's a decision at a different level than what we're empowered. I mean, it's something I think for the administration and potentially the Board of Trustees to debate. They're the ones that, are going to be accountable for money.
mhm.
Any further discussion on that?
What's the
particular
length of
topic?
that pathway, approximate?
I believe it was either around 7,000 or 8,000 feet, so about 1.5 miles.
And surfaces, what's the composition of the
It depends
material?
on where it's at. It's the majority of it, I think, will be a gravel path, but there are a couple areas that are, again, really cool that we want to show
Have to do
off.
a
So there'll be
boardwalk.
a boardwalk.
reapproving the fact that the path will be there. And it's not dependent upon the township paying for it. It's a possibility. We talk them into it, but I don't see where, the requirement to put the path in is part of your site plan, not dependent on who pays for it.
But wait, they're paying for it. It's just the maintenance that's the discussion. I mean, you guys are paying to install it. We aren't. Am I right?
Correct, yes.
Anything else, or still debating, still thinking, contemplating? Okay, well, then it sounds like we're ready for a motion.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the final site plan for 2313-1118 with the conditions as agreed to in the planner's report by the applicant and the conditions in the engineering report that elucidate what is required for final engineering approval.
Moved by Commissioner Pratt, and supported by, Commissioner Barberina to approve application 2313-1118. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, good luck to you.
Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing you in the future. Okay, we have the planning and zoning monthly report. Any questions or comments, or any comments from Ms. Howe?
I just wanted to highlight a couple things. Earlier this month, on June 10th, the DDA did recommend approval of their plan with the recommendations of the Planning Commission to the Board of Trustees. And the board is scheduled to review that DDA plan on July 9th. Also on June 10th, the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority met. They held a public hearing and had a consideration of the Phoenix Mill Brownfield plan, which they recommended also to the Board of Trustees for consideration. This would help with the removal of the lead paint and the asbestos and some of the other demolition and environmental conditions on site. So that will also be going to the board on July 9th, excuse me. In partnership with Northville Township and MEDC in Wayne County, we submitted a grant for $100,000 for the MITC corridor that would be used for future marketing by both townships. We'll be notified by July 1st if we've been awarded that. And then the Board of Trustees is going to have an economic development presentation on July 9th. So if there's any recommendations of what you'd like to see, a large majority of that presentation will be things that the Planning Commission has worked on and maybe what you hope to work on in the future. I know we've talked about a joint meeting before with the board and doing like a tour. Maybe that's something that we could really solidify for the fall, perhaps. But you're welcome to attend that meeting, and if there's anything that you would, particularly like brought up, project-related or accomplishments, please feel free to email or stop by as we prepare that presentation in the next couple weeks. And if you have any other questions on the May report, I'm happy to answer.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Is there a motion to receive and file?
I move we receive and file the monthly report.
A moved by Commissioner Pratt, supported by Commissioner Barberina to receive and file the monthly report. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And the proposed resolution for the consideration of a woodlands ordinance. It was at our place this evening. Not sure if everyone had an opportunity to look through it. Are there any questions, comments, concerns, edits? If not, is there,
Excuse me.
okay, sure.
That is just a request that some sort of ordinance be
Right,
done.
right,
No detail.
no.
That's going to be up to us, though.
Who drafts?
The
it?
draft,
Yeah,
it would come back to
Because
us.
this is,
yeah.
this is on our,
So I would think, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I would think that then it comes back to us and we set the parameters and then the township attorney drafts the ordinance.
well, yeah, I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
And I was reading the Canton issue, you know, with those trees,
Yeah.
that's going to federal court now.
Yeah, I saw that.
It'd be a big thing.
Well, they're still in the process at the county level. Where are these folks? I know they had a meeting that there were some protesters at and so forth, the old Ford plant.
Oh, at the Phoenix Mill?
Yeah,
The brownfield plan is moving forward to go to the board for consideration. The next, or at the same time, concurrently, the applicant is preparing their site plan, which will come before the planning commission later this summer, I think. They would like to be open either by the end of this year or early next year. As far as the Wilcox Mill, that is located in the city of Plymouth. And I was unable to attend last night, but I know some of the trustees did, and Chairman Sobalski also attended. And I heard it was well attended. I'm not sure if you have more you'd like to add.
Well, it was at the Penn Theater, and I'd say it was pretty full. You know, there were a few empty seats here and there. And they had representatives there from the county, representatives from the people that wishes to purchase, laid out a very clear path of what they want to accomplish there. The county laid out, had a presentation as to what they're trying to accomplish by selling these various mills. So there's the one in the city, there's the one in the township, there's the one by Newburgh Lake.
right, I was going to say.
Yeah, that one, and then the Nankin Mills one. You know, I think, remember Nancy Darga? She was over here. She claimed that they're spending $800 and some thousand renovating it. I think they're trying to make it more of an interpretive kind of a place, yeah, for the county. So basically, Tony, I think you pronounce his name Rocco, who is an artist. He was the artist in residence for Ford Motor Company. He's done some of the artwork for Atwater Brewery. He has established this art foundation. So they reach out to youngsters that are at risk, introduce them to art, and other youth as well. So what he would do is the building, the Wilcox Mill, is built kind of like on a hillside, so there's a lower level that goes out. So that would be space for these kids, the studio, some gallery, and they can spill out. There's like a plaza area that would be out, outside. And then the upper level would be Tony's studio, gallery, and an apartment for some. For Tony? Well, no, for artists in residence. So
Literally artist in residence.
Literally.
And they're going to have a sculpture garden, and they're supposed to announce something where they're getting together with some bicyclists. They've been talking about.
You talk about the Wilcox Mill, that's the one right on the corner of Wilcox and
Yeah, near Old Village.
yeah, near all.
Yeah,
Cross the street from the lake.
Yeah, across the street from the lake.
Yeah.
Right.
Dennis, is that party looking to fund it as well?
Yeah, so there was a lot of questions as to who actually is going to own this thing. So there's going to be an entity to be determined. But to me, it's going to be Tony that's going to own it. This is what I got out of it. Tony is the one that's going to own it. And then it's going to be leased out to this art foundation.
Mm.
So that's sort of the arrangement that's in place there now. And they got into discussions, there was questions and answers from the audience, similar to what we had here. Well, what happens if Tony's no longer here? Well, there are covenants in the deed like there are with our own mill here that continue on with the land. So that's somewhat protected. And the county representatives went in through the whole thing about why they're doing this. The funding for Wayne County Parks has dropped. It was at $12 million just prior to the recession, and now it's like around $9 million because, the property values went down, and the Headley Amendment, has impact on how those taxes get increased and and then 15% of what they collect goes to the local municipalities, and then about 70% goes just to maintain the park. So it leaves them with very little money to make improvements. And these buildings, they're saying that, they're 70-some years old. They're almost ready, to fall apart. If they don't act on it soon, the buildings will be lost. So that's basically what might happen.
Got it.
Okay, so back to the Woodlands ordinance. Anything else? Is there a motion?
Chairman, I'll move that we approve the request to the township board to develop a woodlands ordinance.
Yeah, adopt the resolution as submitted.
Right.
Okay.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Pratt and supported by, moved by Commissioner Postel and supported by Commissioner Pratt to adopt the draft resolution for consideration of Woodlands ordinance. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I have a couple of comments that I'd like to make since we were talking about the mill. Kurt Heisian invited me to a meeting to talk about trees, and Laura was there, and two representatives from Hilltop Golf Course were there. The park supervisor was there, and I think that other guy was the DPW guy.
Correct. Dan Hammond and Eric, I'm blanking on his last name, and then Sarah Wiesel also from,
Eric Anderson?
Eric Anderson, yes, I'm sorry. It was my first time meeting him, actually.
So basically, Kurt went through, four sources of trees, how much is in the tree fund, and then there's the Webasto, it's putting up 150 trees, and then I wasn't familiar, Lori, what the other two things he put, the relief and the arc, what are the sources of that? I didn't understand that.
Yep, those are grant programs that are offered, nonprofit, and then for relief, and then ARC is, I believe, a regional, I don't know if they're a nonprofit. Sarah Wiesel is the primary contact for those two, but they do provide assistance in volunteers and the trees themselves for planting in a municipality.
So there's about $20,000 in the tree fund. Webasto's putting up 150 trees. The relief, these are all approximate, 15 trees there, and the arc might be 400. So no decisions were made, they were just identifying the areas where these trees might be planted, and I think the top priority, and you can jump in, Laura, if I'm misquoting, they're really interested in doing the center of the ball diamonds, you know, at the township park. That's sort of a swampy area, and so they'd like to do something there. And they're looking at some perhaps additional trees.
You say in the center of the ball diamond?
In between the
Where they come
diamonds?
together, where they come together. Not on the diamond.
On the other side, okay. That's second base.
Sounds like an odd plan to me.
Run around the car. And the pitcher's mound.
Maybe. And then around the fire station too, behind the clubhouse. So, you know, areas such as that. But they're not going to do anything till fall anyway. So as I said, no decisions, just identifying areas and what has the township got in hand to work with. Do you have anything else then?
Just as those, meeting details are kind of finalized, they'll be shared, and hopefully the group will meet again, and we'll discuss it more formally at the Planning Commission and the board, and there's an Environmental Steward Committee now, so we'll be talking about these more in the future.
Okay. And then just also to let you know that Kurt Heisey and Jack Dempsey has asked me to serve on the historical district. So that, I understand, is coming up before the board next
Yeah.
week. For the, I guess, I don't know if it's an ordinance or the establishment.
Yeah, it's a commission.
Yeah.
I still think it should be paid, though. It's not paid.
So I've accepted that, and we'll see what happens next week. So that's all I have. Unless you have something, Laura, or anybody else.
Because a couple of years ago, we had, some available free trees that were used in subdivisions. They were far from free because what it took to keep them alive over the time was pretty expensive. So when they look at the availability of the trees, keeping them going until they actually root and grow is a major expense.
Yeah, they did talk about the residential program. I think the group kind of supported a residential program, but I didn't have the feeling that was a for sure thing if that was going to continue.
I think it'll be explored, because in the past, you're right, they have given trees to neighborhood associations.
By residential program, you mean residents could buy on the program, or these would be trees?
They go in your subdivision.
Oh, in the common areas?
Yeah, that's something that we've done before.
That they were putting them in, but all of a sudden they had to hire people to go out and water them or refill the bags and all that.
Well, those ones they planted along Powell between Ridge and Napier, a bunch of them died. A ton of them died. They were planted around.
Do you have something, Laura, or does anyone else have anything, other comments?
I do have a couple comments, if
Okay.
that's okay. Supervisor Heisey had shared this about the Artist Haven. I can email this out. It was in the Detroit News if you'd like, just after the meeting.
That's the article I saw this morning.
Okay. Yeah, and here's the pen.
Oh, wow.
You can see it was quite full.
That was full. That was in today's paper?
Yeah.
Was, Dennis, you were at the meeting.
Yeah.
Was the feeling that people were supporting it or not,
People
or
were,
questioning it?
I would have to say most people there were supporting it. There were some questions, what was the relationship between this art foundation and park and the Plymouth, Community Arts Group? But they say that they all complement each other, and evidently this art foundation has their offices in park, and they have a good relationship with park. So that was brought up. And then a few other things. One individual got up and asked questions about putting solar panels on the building. You know, they're very into making this ecological, you know, friendly and all of that stuff. And but those were addressed. They don't know because they haven't gotten the building yet. They have to take sizing, you know, calculations and that kind of thing.
They all look a lot alike. I mean, they all have that lower level. And I'm part of the Partnership for Arts and Humanity in Canton, and we have the Village Arts Factory that looks exactly like that.
Was it a con building? Because these were
I
all
believe
con.
so,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're all
You know,
con
he
buildings.
built 18 Village Arts, 18 Village Factories for farmers.
Right.
And then he built his 19th, which is the one at Cherry Hill Village, at Ridge and Cherry Hill Road. But that one he built for veterans. The rest of them he built for farmers, so they had something to do in the off-season.
Are they all by water, rivers, that sort of thing?
All are not on rivers, no, because the one at Cherry Hill and Ridge, there's no river there. They're all large parcels, larger parcels. Ours is 14 acres.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone that was really very negative about it.
Daniel Sabbath.
You know, they just, you know, more like questioning about it, so.
Gee, there's a
But they were
shot.
very strict about, you know, how you could speak. They didn't, you know, you couldn't touch the microphone, for example, because I think those protesters were out there, which they didn't enter the building, but I think they were concerned that there might not be a conducive discussion about the plan, so it wasn't.
Yeah, and the protesters are all about the county selling the
Right.
property in the first place.
Yeah,
Don't sell our,
don't sell the park.
don't sell our park.
So how are they pricing it, did they say?
How much they, it was for sale for like 350,000, something like that.
Well, it's better than it deteriorating. I mean, all these buildings are falling.
Yeah.
And they showed pictures, you know, the rebar is
Yeah.
exposing now, and, you know, they're saying that if they don't.
Yeah, that one on Wilcox is really, that's going to take a lot of work to rehab.
Commissioners, one more thing. The applicants for Plymouth Plaza at 5 Mile and Beck Road, they have requested to poll the commission to see if there's,
Scroll back, was that the protesters?
oh, yeah,
Oh.
to see if there's any availability in your schedules for the next week or two for a special meeting consideration.
Well, let me
Because
tell
they
you,
missed the deadlines?
Bill and I have met, did we meet once or twice already with them?
Twice.
Twice,
You have.
yes.
Yeah.
And it saves you a lot of work to get through it. But we're trying to get this buttoned up.
That, it truly, as I said to, because Ned was actually there at this meeting. Oh, yeah, he was there. Ned and Leo and Laura and Dennis and I. And we're working through these things and we're looking at these plans. And Laura's got this list of 84,000 things that they need to do. And none of them get done. And, you know, it's the same old story that we've been dealing with
Down to
forever.
84,000, that's pretty
Yeah, well, you know, I do go hyperbole every once in a while. But I simply said to him, I said, Ned, look, I'm looking you right in the eye and I'm telling you this. Do not come back to this planning commission until all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. Because the level of frustration at the planning commission is very high. And quite honestly, we're feeling a little bit of pressure from above on this, from my perspective. That's just my perspective. And we need to do our job. And if these things are not taken care of, we need to say no. And
He needs to do his job.
and he needs to, and the reason for his, that this is, I love this. I got this email, I think everybody did, today, that Sherry responded to Leo, and the subject matter is Plymouth Plaza time sensitive. Well, who's created the Plymouth Plaza time sensitivity? It certainly has not been the Planning Commission. And so it just, I mean, we as a group have always been able to work with people, but there are limits, and the limits have been, from my perspective, in this particular developer's case, far exceeded.
On every application.
On whatever application. So, you know, in all deference, Laura, quite honestly.
Is that a deer? It's a deer. It's eating the plants. Excuse me, sorry, Bill.
No, you're fine.
It's eating the
You're fine.
flowers?
That's more important than what I'm talking about.
It's eating the flowers.
You know, for us to clear our schedules for this guy is, from my perspective, beyond the pale. Now, he has, as described in our last meeting, our second meeting Dennis and I had with him, he has an issue with one of his potential tenants, and that's Taco Bell. Now, this, if you read this email, did you not
No,
get?
that's just our group.
Oh, okay, it wasn't, okay, I'm sorry. Well, you're welcome to read it, because it's for everyone, really. But the, apparently, Taco Bell is putting a lot of pressure on him to be able to start construction on July 1st. And that it just isn't happening. It just isn't. So, you know, as I said to him, I said, come back on July, what is it, 17th is our next meeting? Correct. Come back on July 17th with your plans finalized, and you'll have a good opportunity. Come back with what you've been presenting to us so far, and you have no opportunity. So, to me, that's, I think us scheduling a special meeting is, we've gone as far as we need to go. That's my feeling. Right. Because I don't know what you've seen lately, Laura, but to me, he's just not ready. He won't be ready at a special meeting the first week of July any more than he would be the second week of July or whatever. He needs to get his act together and be ready to present a solid set of plans at our July 17th meeting. That's my feeling.
I agree.
Well, he did want to come tonight, but Bill, and I agree that he wasn't ready.
You know, he wasn't ready. There was just no way.
Well, you know,
And he's not going to be ready anytime before the 17th of July either.
I gotta say though, where he says it's time sensitive, on our side, I think that corner is time sensitive. That corner has sat there. It's an entrance to our township, very heavily traveled, and it's looked like crap for how long? Oh, no, I know that. So shouldn't he be somehow, don't we have any leverage in terms of people who stall on projects like that?
Well, Laura, let me ask you this question. So, you know, he has some time commitment with Taco Bell. So this is his sense of urgency with his grading plan. So he can move ahead with the grading plan without us making any decision at this point?
Correct. He can move ahead with the grading plan, provided that he has those items that Sherry has outlined the building department needs, like approval of the grading plan by engineering, his soil erosion permit from Wayne County, a bond for the work. He can do that before the site is actually constructed.
Yeah, so does he have that though?
Not at this moment.
And there is a concern that he not lose, like, for example, the Panera tenant, which would be a nice addition to the township. I don't know what the solution, I understand the frustration, and perhaps I'm throwing this out for your consideration. If he can get this grading, the requirements for the grading plan together, we can decide for a special meeting, but I think he needs to get everything together for the grading plan first. It's a sign of good faith that he wants to move forward and he's getting his act together.
Commissioners, the grading plan is approved.
Pardon?
The grading plan is approved. He has his soil erosion permit, but he has to file for the permit for the grading plan, which he hasn't done yet, and he has to pay his fees for that. We have approved their grading plan. I believe he does have his soil erosion permit in hand, but there's still a few other steps that he has to follow. That's what he hasn't done yet.
And they're relatively simple steps?
Yes. And this has been going on for 2 weeks.
Like writing a check, maybe.
This has been going on for 2 weeks, and it's bounced back and forth between a grading permit and full permit. So this is 2 weeks, I shouldn't say 2 weeks ago, because we just approved the grading plan last week. He could have come in at the end of last week and picked up his grading permit.
Well, couldn't we or Laura, on our behalf, say to him, we'd be more than happy to have a special meeting as long as you have this, and this.
We'll schedule it after we see
Yeah,
the
well,
homework.
that, we're all in. If you're in, we're in. I mean, is that difficult?
I
or-
think he has to show a sign of good faith. And because we have scheduled special meetings, and then they're canceled, and then here we're moving around our
Right,
schedules.
right.
And now we're getting close to the 4th of July holiday and all that. People are going more on vacation at this time of the year. Right,
Just not, yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So what would that show of good faith be? Because he said
to
he's already
get
got
this,
the grading
to
plan.
at least get the grading.
He's got the grading
Yeah,
plan.
well, he's got a,
Do the rest of this
yeah,
stuff,
right.
So,
It's not a big thing.
I can convey that if that's the planning
I think that would
commission's
be
desire.
equitable,
Well,
right?
and Laura, the other thing there was another email, Bill, you had gotten this email where it came from Leo that showed us the elevations again.
Oh, yeah.
And I started looking at the elevations, and they're still not right. They're not to scale. It's obviously not to scale. You can tell. And so
Leo
frankly, I didn't even look at it very carefully because it's still not right. I can right off the bat.
Well, not only that, but it's in black and white, so you can't
Well, you can't tell.
tell what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I was happy, I printed them off, printed those two things off. You're welcome to take a look at them if you want, commissioners, but, I mean, this is what you're looking at. So, you really can't tell much, other than the height of the building and that kind of thing.
And I think I used them once without Bill prior to this. This gets so involved.
And nor has any applicant abused the commission.
Well, if he gets the
17th.
grading permit, let me ask you this, if he gets the grading, get the grading process done and completed, are you willing to meet in a special meeting?
Why? If he can proceed then with the grading, and that won't even be complete by the time our regular meeting on the 17th.
Well, I can kind of give you an idea why, because not only is it grading, but the Taco Bell wants to construct their pad.
Yeah,
It's not part of the grading. They want to construct their pad, and they can't really construct anything except grade without site plan.
The grading plan essentially is just going to allow them to finish cleaning up the site.
Yeah,
That's all it's really going to do, and get it ready so that then they can start the pad and
The
the
whole-
other work.
that's where the Taco Bell issue comes to fore.
And it's my understanding Taco Bell wants to try to be open by the end of the year.
Right.
So they want to get going on this, and that's where all the pressure is coming in.
That's,
But they can go ahead and do that, and they won't be done with cleaning up the site by the 17th anyway, right?
It would, it would probably be hard to say. It's my understanding that Ned's going to take care of that all himself instead of having another contractor do it, so.
well, next week is beyond what they could do anyway.
Yeah, and then the week after that is 4th of July,
And the week after that is 4th of July, so
and then,
you're talking about a 7-day period, which to me
mhm,
makes no sense whatsoever.
it doesn't.
Our standard meeting is, sorry,
Our standard meeting is the 17th, and that's what he should aim for. That's my feeling. And that's exactly what I told him.
And I think that sends them a little bit of a message too.
Right, because we were all available on June 3rd,
We were.
and we're all available tonight.
I agree.
Are we available on June 3rd or July 3rd?
We were available.
Oh, June 3rd, yeah, right. Right, it is the one that got canceled.
Got
Do you think
deadlines,
this
got to meet
puts
them.
the whole Panera Bread development into,
I don't know. I mean, they've stressed that it's, time sensitive, but I haven't had any direct communication with Panera, so I'm just kind of at the receiving end.
They're not going to pull out over 2 weeks. Hmm? No, and they're not going to pull out because of 2 weeks delay. Come on.
We were approached with the same issue with Buddies, that it was time sensitive.
Yeah,
you know,
hurry
so
up, hurry up, hurry up.
Everything is time sensitive
Yeah.
with Ned, and he has to be on the flip side of that time sensitive.
Yep,
And it's time sensitive for us.
got to respect our time too.
okay. Any other?
No, I think we pretty much summed it up.
Other questions, concerns?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Who supported?
I'll support.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Pratt and supported by Commissioner Harp to adjourn the meeting at 8:20. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries adjourned.